During the Ebola outbreak, there was about an 8 to 10% drop in the market. It then quickly recovered. I wanted to give you good news. There are winners out there, right? So if you want to be prepared and make money in the next pandemic, if that's what you want to do, buy stock in hazmat suit makers and protective clothing or companies that make antiviral drugs for that particular pandemic. You'll probably do pretty well. There are actually mutual funds for pandemic preparedness. You can bet on anything in this country. Some products do well. 1918, including masks, same thing today. Pandemics really are times of opportunity, and I like George R.R. Martin's quote of chaos is a ladder. There's an opportunity for people to have political gain, financial gain, and personal gain during times of social upheaval. And that will probably occur. There will be misleading stories on social media, miracle cures that will be touted, conspiracy theories. One thing that is kind of new, you could probably buy and order your own vaccine on the internet for about $200 now. So you can buy your own vaccine and probably vaccinate yourself. If you have a little bit of knowledge, and most likely somebody will come up with a scheme to sell that in a safe, in a legal way, not a...
What? What did I just listen to? I hope Dr. Natalie Winters, who I'm now awarding an honorary degree in Ralph Barrick Studies, who's joining us here in studio, can explain it to me. Welcome to another episode of the National Pulse. It's Tuesday. It's Tuesday, the 15th of June. You're right there. We've got. Hold on, I've got your wrong microphone up. Try that again.
Hello?
Oh, that's one. That one's better. Be really good if I got this right. It's Tuesday, the 15th of June, the year of our Lord 2021. It's also my father's birthday.
Happy birthday.
No, my father's birthday.
Well, I assume he's listening. Maybe.
Not sure about that.
Well, happy birthday.
Happy birthday. I spoke to him this morning. I wished him a happy birthday.
I spoke to him this morning.
You did? Hold on a minute.
No.
Yeah. So I had a phone call with my dad this morning for it's his birthday present. Is a phone call with me. It's an honorary.
Did you make him pay the lifetime membership?
No, it's an honorary lifetime
okay.
membership that he got for this morning. No, but I did send him. I sent him a Fortnum. Now I hope he's not listening to this because it won't have arrived yet, so I don't want to ruin the surprise. But I sent him a Fortnum and Mason hamper. Are you familiar with this? Very nice hamper.
No.
It's a very nice hamper. This show is not sponsored by Fortnum and Mason. In fact, they'd probably be aghast, probably some left-wing company, but they'd probably be aghast at that. However, it was a real treat to hear from my father this morning, not least because things are starting to open in the United Kingdom. I know that Boris Johnson is trying to push back the Freedom Day, I think they're calling it over there now. Freedom Day. Imagine that. You have to have a day to commemorate, celebrate, and mark freedoms being given back to people from the country that gave the world freedom. So we'll get into the European Union's vaccine passports later on in this show, but I want to open with what we just heard. So Natalie, I haven't been here for a few days. You haven't been here for a few days. It's great to see you again.
Yeah.
I haven't seen you in ages and ages. And last time I saw you, actually, you were soaked under an umbrella.
That is true. I had
Somewhere
to
in
put
Charleston.
my shoes in the oven to get the water out of them.
I put my hotel's hairdryer inside my boot.
That's a good idea.
It's not a good idea because, of course, the leather's all dried out and crapified now.
My straps on my wedge are kind of melted.
So we didn't just go dancing in the rain in Charleston. We were both in Charleston for a wedding this past weekend. What a lovely occasion that was. And then I stopped by Wilmington, North Carolina on the way back, which was also a lovely occasion. So I'm starting to get out and about into the country again, and I'm glad my father and my family are starting to get out and about back in England again as well. Natalie, in those days,
Yes.
the last
while
couple
you
of
were
days,
traveling.
while you were traveling, while we were sleeping, you have come up with a number of very important stories, I think, that bear some serious discussion. But some people don't think they bear serious discussion. Some people think they bear burying. And listeners of this show, viewers of this show in the past when it was televised, and I can hear the chorus going, yeah, put the cameras in the room. No.
No, you don't want them.
No, it's a mess. You definitely don't want smell-o-vision in this room. People will be aware of this organization called Lead Stories. Lead Stories is the predominant fact checker for Facebook.
And TikTok.
Well, hang on. I'm trying to build up to something here. Why don't you just... they censored the story. End of podcast. All right, yeah, that's it. That's the end. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Natalie just...
Well, I'm a fact checker now. I just had to let you know.
So, okay.
Okay, you can restart.
Welcome to the National Files. I spoke to my dad this morning. We went to Charleston in those few...
It rained.
It rained. Shoes in the oven. All right. So, Lead Stories has often targeted us, targeted our stories, really bizarrely targeted you in a bizarre way, which we'll get into in a minute. Natalie, but they have not placed kind of a contextualization of our story, but they've actually removed the story from Facebook altogether. You can't actually access it. You have to go ironically, via the Lead Stories website, and then Lead Stories links to it, by the way. So, all right, whatever. It's one step removed. Maybe Lead Stories are now purveying misinformation, if that's the charge. So let's unpack that. The clip we just heard in the beginning of the show. What was that? Who was that? What was he saying? And why have Lead Stories taken it down?
Sure, I will speak very slowly because there are a lot of moving parts in this story. So who you heard speaking in the introduction of the show was an individual named Dr. Ralph Barrick, who works at UNC Chapel Hill. But why?
I was there last Thursday.
Yes.
Ralph.
Just
FYI. Snooping around.
But why our dear friend Ralph is so relevant to COVID-19 is because he has collaborated with Bat Lady Shi Zhengli of the Wuhan Institute of Virology for nearly a decade. So,
is that your word, collaboration, or is that her word?
Well, her words are, quote, longtime collaborator. So I guess I'm being nice.
Shall we prove that?
It.
Shall we prove that?
I think so.
Let's prove that.
I would like to thank all the collaborators, particularly my long-term collaborator from Linfa Wang, Peter Daszak, and Ralph Barrick, and also the staff from my team, from my institute.
So it's hard to hear, but she says her long-term collaborator, Peter Daszak, who this show has made famous, and now Dr. Ralph Barrick.
Yeah, so I think, to put it simply, much like we've made Peter Daszak famous in exposing not only his ties to the Chinese Communist Party, but how he was instrumental in the cover-up of COVID-19's origins, specifically by spearheading that statement in The Lancet, serving as a World Health Organization investigator, Ralph Barrick is kind of the next person that we're going to focus on because he plays a very important role. So in simple terms, he created a humanized mouse model, which basically allowed for these gain-of-function type experiments, which again is a weaponization of either the transmissibility or lethality of certain pathogens within these mice, potentially being adapted so humans could receive the viruses that they were playing around with, which of course happened to be SARS-like bat coronaviruses, obviously COVID-19 being short for coronavirus. So Ralph Barrick is very, very instrumental in the whole kind of ongoing investigation debate over whether or not Fauci funded and any work at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So Peter Daszak, whose EcoHealth Alliance received millions of taxpayer dollars, which he admits, we had another story in his own words, he admits that they collected these samples from the bat caves, quote, with U.S. taxpayer dollars. The instrumental man for the gain of function aspect of everything going on here is Ralph Barrick, because he's been a hardcore advocate of this style of research. In this article, the one where he talks about potentially profiting off of a pandemic, there's also links there where in 2016, when they were debating, that they being the scientific community, whether or not to lift the ban on gain-of-function research, they held a multi-day symposium, and Ralph Barrick spoke several times, and he said that gain-of-function research was critical, and it was very imperative that they lift the ban on that type of research. So Ralph Barrick is both very pro gain-of-function research and very much embedded with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So that, which I hope I did a good job explaining the ties there, and there'll be more to come over the days, you'll most definitely see. But why those ties, juxtaposed with the clip that we played in the opening, are so just jarring, I would say, is because you see Ralph Barrick, who in 2018, right, a year before COVID-19 was created, or before it was, as Sure and Ralph would say, discovered in a wet market, he talks about, maybe he's joking, maybe he's not, but he talks about, quote, how to make money from the next pandemic. And you can see he has a slide.
He's scheming.
And scheming, Alan Duke, take that. But the title of the slide, which unfortunately he doesn't say it ever, but you can see in the picture if you're reading the article, the name of the title of the slide is Global Catastrophe, Opportunities Exist.
Wow, hold on. Now, this story is up, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, up on the National Pulse. I want you to all go and check it out and share it and go through some of the detail as well that we're talking about here. Say that again. The slide that he's presenting while he's very publicly scheming on how to make money from pandemics is entitled what?
Global Catastrophe, Opportunities Exist.
Opportunities on the back of hundreds of thousands of people's dead bodies.
And the next slide is entitled Pandemics, Opportunity. So a lot of opportunity.
A lot of opportunity for people like Ralph Barrick, a lot of opportunity for people like Xi Jinping.
Which I won't get ahead. I think I know where we're going to go with this, but believe me, Ralph Barrick has profited immensely from this pandemic in terms of research grants.
Yep.
But if you watch the clip, obviously you listen to it, but he just explains what you should invest in, what you shouldn't invest in. And the slide, it shows, down to the...
Is he a money manager? Is he a hedge fund manager? Is he?
Nope, just a
research
research type.
Why is a research doctor at UNC Chapel Hill giving financial advice on what to invest in during pandemics?
Yeah, down to the 10th place.
And here's the question. Has he invested in those things? And did he invest in those things at the onset of this pandemic? Because that would strike me as a pretty gnarly conflict of interest.
Very, very gnarly. And apparently Lead Stories doesn't think so. But you can see on the slide down to the 10th percentage point, he's describing which stocks and which stock markets went up, which went down in regards to Ebola, in regards to the 1918 pandemic. He categorizes winners and losers, and he goes on to explain also how there can be, quote, political gain, financial gain, and personnel gain. That's what he says with regards to pandemics. So as much as people want to say that we're conspiracy theorists, these people in power do a really bad job of making us seem crazy, because they literally are on record saying, quote, how to make money in the next pandemic a year before a massive pandemic that arguably they at least are linked to the entity that potentially created this virus, either intentionally or by accident. That I think is pretty good evidence for a conspiracy theory.
So Lead Stories, let's bring this back to Lead Stories then. Okay, so Barrick's a bad dude. We know Barrick's a bad dude. How do we know Barrick's a bad dude? Well, a lot of the stuff that we know of gain of function, a lot of the things we know of what's happened at UNC Chapel Hill, his collaboration, in the words of Xi Jinping, that he is a long-term collaborator of a... You don't need to convince me of that. Let me go back to Lead Stories here, and Alan Duke. I want people to internalize that name, because that is a name of one of the most corrupt people in this country right now. He absolutely is. He is a fraud. His website is a fraud. And what he does is he goes around defending corporate interest while being paid by the same corporates that do it, right? Now listen. his story, and it's written by him, which is the interesting thing. Usually he farms this out to one of his little underlings that he brought over from CNN. If you don't remember, ladies and gentlemen, if you're tuning into this podcast and you haven't followed our work on lead stories before, go back and familiarize yourself. Throw it into your search engine, thenationalpulse.com, and put in quote marks, lead stories or Alan Duke. Find out all about these guys. These are the bad guys. And you want to know who these people are, and you want to stop them at every available opportunity. Alan Duke writes it himself. He's supposedly the editor-in-chief of the site, but he's taking his time out to defend Dr. Ralph Baric. And that's really interesting to me. He says, does a video of a 2018 lecture by an American professor show him scheming on how to make money from a pandemic? No, that's not true. An 89-second clip included in an article making the claim is edited to exclude the context of the statements that people historically have found ways to profit during pandemics by marketing fake cures, spreading misinformation, and investing in protective gear. The full video confirmed that Dr. Ralph Baric, a professor of epidemiology at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, was giving an academic presentation on the history and future of pandemics. It was clearly not scheming, except the slide itself is titled Opportunities. He's calling them opportunities. He's not... Yes, in that clip you hear him talking about misinformation and fakeness and falsehoods and all of that. And of course there is that. I mean, I don't think any reasonable human being needs to be told that in any given scenario there is somebody trying to sell you something that is fraudulent, right? You want to buy this SD card off me? Sure. He says, offering her an empty SD card packet, and that's the point, right? You don't need Dr. Ralph Baric to tell you, hey, snake oil salesmen exist, right? But apparently you do need Dr. Ralph Baric to tell you what opportunities there are, right? And he would know a thing or two about opportunities. Mm-hmm. Natalie, one of the recent opportunities that Dr. Ralph Baric has availed for himself is what?
Well, before I get to that, I just have to say, because Alan Duke.
Remember, I have Germany-France playing in 45 minutes, so...
Okay. Well, Alan Duke, who, of course, has, I think, called you to tell you that he knows where I live and has...
That is correct.
...to come and say hi or something along those lines.
That is correct.
I mean...
This is a 55-year-old ponytailed man.
And I think I was 19 at the time.
Yep.
But just
all those years ago.
Yeah, it was so long ago. Just even taking away, which we'll get into, the ties between Facebook and Ralph Baric and the really intense conflict of interest going on here, his fact check is just awful. Yeah. The crux of it falls into the line, quote, "It was clearly not scheming."
Right.
Like, that's not a fact check.
Right,
like, that's just an opinion.
Well,
do you know what I mean?
It is. I mean, this is the thing Lead Stories did last time as well, if you remember. They took my editorial decision, which is my decision as an editor of a news site, to use the word scheming instead of plotting or planning or presenting or whatever. You know, editors tend to use different words for different stresses in different parts of the story because they either flow better, they may have onomatopoeic value, they may have alliterative value, you know, all these other considerations. But Alan Duke, oh, well, that's not a scheme. You know, that's more of a consideration than a scheme. This is something that is not fact checkable. Nevertheless, they have the full force of a multi-billion-dollar company, Facebook, behind them. And as you say, another multi-billion-dollar company, TikTok, who they recently signed a contract with, right? So Alan Duke and Lead Stories are fact-checking on behalf of Facebook and TikTok. TikTok owned by ByteDance, being a key operator within the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda framework, okay, and have admitted to being so. They've stood by this thing that they said that we will use our platform to promote socialist values, right? That's ByteDance in its own words, direct quote. So that's one part of the conflict of interest. Tell us about the next part of the conflict of interest.
Sure. So that was why I struggled with the headline on this story, because there were so many conflicts of interest going on here. So Ralph Baric in 2020 received a six-figure grant, nearly $500,000 from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, which is, of course, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook fame. So this grant was to conduct studies. Again, it's kind of unclear, but relevant to COVID-19, they said they used the money to buy some new machine for their lab. Went over my head. That's what they said they used it for. Who knows what they actually used it for?
Well, even if you take them at face value.
Yeah, sure.
Whatever.
Regardless, they are funding this man who is very, very, very much in the middle of the storm with regards to the origins of COVID-19. Also, hardcore advocate like the gain of function research. And remember, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative is also the same entity that really bankrolled millions, at least from the Center for Tech and Civic Life. You may remember that was the group that really plowed money into these kind of swing counties to ensure voter turnout. The only thing that they didn't say publicly was that it was a specific type of voter turnout that they were keen on bringing about, and that was, of course, for Joe Biden. I think we analyzed some of the grants that they had distributed, and of the, I think, largest, 10 or 15, 99.4% went to Joe Biden strongholds. So, this was critical to kind of influencing the makeup and the outcome of the 2020 election. And then you also see this same entity donating to someone who really, just because of the mainstream media and their willingness to defer to people like Ralph Barrick and Peter Daszak on the subject of COVID-19, also funding one of the foremost leading voices in regards to the scientific response for COVID-19, which of course had dramatic ramifications and implications for the 2020 election. So Facebook gives him this grant. I get a notification last night. Anytime I see anything that Lead Stories does, it always makes me laugh because Alan Duke is just so absurd. But
I think you're doing him a massive favor by calling him absurd. I think he's actually very, very dangerous at this point.
I think he did cut his ponytail.
I mean, that doesn't make him less dangerous. That just means he's concealing the fact that he ever had a ponytail.
But no, so now there's kind of a sliding scale of Facebook fact checks that you can get. Sometimes it says mostly true, mostly false, sort of false.
Yeah. And now we've got scheming.
Yeah, now I think, we added a new category. But this is, they just say blatantly false, can't even click on the story anymore. So you basically see a fact checker who admits that their, quote, main source of revenue is Facebook.
Zuckerberg.
Fact checking and basically censoring entirely a story about someone who has a close financial relationship with the Facebook founder's kind of philanthropic arm and running interference on behalf of that. Not to mention, tip of the iceberg, right, the fact that this company is also taking in a ton of money from TikTok, which is, of course, linked to the Chinese government. So even if you take the Facebook narrative out of it, you see this Lead Stories group basically running cover against kind of COVID-19 could have escaped from a lab and people who were very important and relevant to that whole narrative. So
I'm tempted to visualize this in some way, but it would just be a load of different arrows pointing at the same people over and over again. Right, that is that is Natalie, the brain of Natalie Winters, also screaming, "Help me!" Yeah. Look, so let me get this straight. Okay, so Lead Stories, right, which is funded by Facebook, I'm writing it down here, and TikTok, right? Lead Stories intervenes on behalf of UNC and Ralph Barrick. Ralph Barrick is also funded by the profits of Facebook through the Zuckerberg Chan initiative, right? Lead Stories also was the one censoring anti-Biden stories, such as the story we did about Black Lives Matter and where the money was going and how it was going to Act Blue. They censored that one. What about TikTok, ByteDance? That's the Chinese Communist Party. We know that. So here you have Ralph Barrick come in because through Xi Jinping, he's tied to the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, this is one of the single most extraordinary, and what's really extraordinary about all of this is it's so eminently verifiable. Mm-hmm. Like if anybody in the media wanted to do their actual job, if Brandy Zadrozny wanted to do an actual job of work in journalism for a day, we could hand her this and she would be able to go away and corroborate each one of these details independently, right? These still exist out there. The videos still exist. We've archived everything just in case they try to take all of these things down. This is one of the largest scale conflicts of interests I think this country has probably ever seen, considering the fact that it deals with one of the companies that is one of the largest companies in the world, let alone in the United States, especially as regards data and information flow. That is Facebook. TikTok also being one of those companies in the world. And Zuckerberg Chan, of course, as you say, was at the same time through CTCL, the Center for Tech and Civic Life, funding private elections practices across the country that were geared directly towards aiding Joe Biden. But that's not all. That's not all. That's not where the whole narrative arc of this thing ends, because, of course, Lead Stories is interfering and intervening in the audit stories that are going up every single day. So, again, they are using their undue influence to try. Basically, what they're doing is very smart by Zuckerberg. He's got this one arm, this propaganda arm, this memory hole arm called Lead Stories. And what Lead Stories is there to do is not tell the truth or check the facts. Lead Stories is there to make sure that Zuckerberg gets every penny's worth out of his investments in other things. Think about it. His investments can be diluted by outside actors who report the truth about his activities. But if Lead Stories is interfering there and making and running interference every single time a story goes up, then the public doesn't get to understand that Zuckerberg is involved in the first instance. You know, they wouldn't have any cause to go and look at Dr. Ralph Barrick and then realize that Barrick got a grant from Zuckerberg himself. This is an extraordinary. I just can't stress this to the audience enough, how extraordinary this story is. And Natalie, just to go back to your story that has now been censored on this, is that nowhere did you claim those 86 seconds were the whole speech?
Yeah, he says I deceptively edited the video. I mean, so I guess by Alan Duke's standards, now anytime we share videos on the National Pulse, even if it's a 2-hour speech, right, I have to just upload the whole thing and say, well, you got to go to minute time.
No. They have to watch the whole thing. What Alan Duke is saying is that anytime any media network now doesn't run the entirety of comments from anyone, then that's doctoring and that's editing.
And we linked to the whole video
whole video
which is why
completely available for people to watch. We linked to it. You can go to it. It's had a ton of views since we put it up.
Well, and I'd also just add too quick on this whole fact-checking thing, which I think COVID-19, the origins of where this virus came from, is kind of the final nail in the coffin against how these fact-checkers are always wrong, right? Remember, they censored people who said that COVID-19 could have possibly originated at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, whether it was users promoting those or the stories themselves. But remember, this also dovetails, I think, very nicely with a story that we put up probably about a month ago. And it's that Facebook is also helping to basically fund a Chinese Communist Party-run journalism school. They partner, one of their fact-checking entities that they partner with, so this is kind of in company with Lead Stories, is a group called the International Center for Journalists. And despite that very vague name, the international work that they do focuses on, of course, the Chinese Communist Party. They are one of the main sponsors, along with Bloomberg News, of the Xinhua Global Business Journalism School. And from this program, which not only does it admit in the dean's letter about the school that it is, quote, a Marxist journalism school, it is obviously run at Xinhua University, which has carried out cyber attacks against the U.S. government and is under complete control of the Chinese Communist Party. But a lot of the people that this journalism school creates, they go on to work for outlets like China Daily, like Xinhua, like CGTN, all of these state-run media outlets that really are at the tip of the spear when it comes to propaganda, whether it's about Uyghurs, COVID-19, China and the U.S., the trade war, whatever you want to say. So in the same kind of funding spree that Facebook is giving a lot of money to Lead Stories to censor our stories about COVID-19, about Chinese Communist Party-linked researchers, they're also quite literally funding the apparatus of Chinese state-run media outlets in the school that is the foremost training ground for really the top propagandists within the Chinese Communist Party. So this whole fact-checker orbit is just... It's not fact-checking, it's disinformation. I guess it accuse the other side of what you're guilty of. Yeah. So they're going to accuse us of spreading disinformation when that's what they're doing. But there's just so many layers of compromise, whether you want to think about from the Chinese Communist Party angle or even just a personal Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, they sent money to this guy, so they're going to cover for him. So yeah, I very heavily dispute this claim that our story is
I don't
false.
think you even need to dispute it. I think the facts stand for themselves, and that's what we do, right? We write stories that are fully linked, fully cited, fully sourced, and then somebody like Alan Duke can come along and whip it off the internet because he thinks it's inconvenient to the people who are paying him money, right? It's them. So the whole thing around this is cui bono, right? Who benefits? In this scenario, is it the ordinary reader who benefits from not being able to access a particular story on Facebook about Dr. Ralph Barrick? No, the ordinary consumer does not benefit from that. They are big enough, they are ugly enough. Ordinary people can make up their own minds about things, especially when we link to everything. The only person who benefits in this scenario is Mark Zuckerberg, Ralph Barrick, and the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Those are the people who benefits. Let me just off the top of my head, I'll say this. I don't think those are the good guys, and I don't think the world thinks of those people as the good guys. So what we have here is almost an international villainy that's taking place right now, right? This is like a superhero movie. We're now several years into the movie, and the bad guys are still winning. The bad guys are still in charge, and we've got our Bat Lady, we've got our Batwoman. Where is our Batman? Right? Who is coming to save the day from these people? And this is one of the things that frustrates me a lot about these characters in the US Congress who go, oh yeah, fire Fauci, we're going to do this fire Fauci bill, etc., etc. But none of them have ever reached out to us. None of them ever said, hey, can we look at the National Pulse's research? Hey, can we get a presentation? Can we get a dossier? Can we get some links? Can we get some articles? Just send us over what you've got. And so always what we get is just something that's made for television, right? A press conference or an interview or something like that. We don't actually get any firm steps. Where are the investigations? Where are the people being called before committees? If you don't have the committees, you're not in charge of the committees, then set up a citizens committee, set up a people's committee, set up a thing on Capitol Hill where you are hearing evidence all day long about what exactly is taking place. Because right now, I am convinced that everything, whether it's on our side or the other side, a lot of it is now just for show, Natalie.
Yeah, I think I said this in one of my first appearances on War Room, but I said there's a new axis of evil, and it is big tech and big media, and then you have the global elite, which I think is epitomized by Mark Zuckerberg, and then you have the Chinese Communist Party. And I think that this story is a perfect example of how they work in tandem. And as you say, when they purvey their propaganda, their disinformation, the people who suffer are your average everyday Americans, whether it's because our response to COVID-19 is impaired because we don't actually know where this virus came from or if it's SARS or not. Dr. Redfield, the former CDC director, was speaking with Fox today. Not only did he basically single out Fauci, saying he was, quote, disappointed in people in the scientific community who weren't open to looking in to the lab leak theory. But he also doubled down on the claims that he made on CNN a few months back, where he says, no, this virus very clearly, someone who has, high level security clearances, came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So I think all these people kind of marched in lockstep. Whether, for instance, whether Fauci genuinely thinks that this virus came from nature, from a wet market, or if Fauci was just scrolling through Facebook one day and he saw that stories about, the virus escaping Wuhan Institute of Virology were marked as false, and that either implicitly or very clearly molded his view of where this virus came from. There is a very, very massive concerted effort to influence everyone on these social media platforms, really to think in line with the Chinese Communist Party. And as you say, it is a very, very, very weird hill to die on. I think for the hill to die on for lead stories to be the Chinese Communist Party and people like Joe Biden, who, of course, those are the only people that they fact check stories about.
Right.
They never fact check stories when average everyday Americans are smeared by mainstream media outlets, when CNN goes to random people's house and accuses people of being Russian agents. I haven't seen any fact checks about that. No, all they do is defend and run cover for the Chinese Communist Party and the narratives that they have paid millions to pump into the Western mainstream media outlets, and on behalf of people like Mark Zuckerberg.
Nobody ever went to, none of, NBC and all these guys, nobody from CNN ever went to the the house of the couple who, was raided in Alaska when they were, falsely raided by the FBI under false pretenses and all of that? Where are the fact checks around that? Where was the speaking truth to power then? I'm reminded, Natalie, of a October 29th, 2020 article entitled "Xi Beckoned, They Came. US tech CEOs fawned over Chinese Communist premier, quote, did you feel the room shake?" And that was your article that looked at a 2015 New York Times piece revealing how CEOs from America's largest tech companies, social media companies, including Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg, Apple's Tim Cook, Amazon's Jeff Bezos, fawned over the Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping back in September of 2015. So maybe it all goes back to that meeting. Maybe it all goes back to that moment where Zuckerberg realizes, hey, this is the wagon I want to hitch myself to for the foreseeable future. And all of this, whether it's CTCL, the Zuckerberg Chan Foundation, Ralph Barrick, Lead Stories, TikTok, maybe it all stems from there.
Well, and I'll also introduce another entity with a similarly confusing name, but this is the Cyberspace Administration of China, which people may remember from a few months back. This is a Chinese Communist Party-controlled government organization, and this entity controls what's called the Wuhan Army. So there were, I believe, leaked documents. I believe it was ProPublica a few months back, and they showed that this administration, this body, was not only deploying hundreds of thousands of people online, but they were really trying to target anyone who's anyone in the West with these narratives that COVID-19 escaped from a wet market. And primarily, they also wanted to attack President Trump's handling of coronavirus. But do you know what's so interesting about that? That, again, very clearly a Chinese Communist Party disinformation propaganda group. Well, in 2016, Mark Zuckerberg actually spoke at a conference that they organized called the World Internet Conference. And since then, several Facebook executives have returned and spoken at that conference. Also people, I believe, from other social media and big tech companies like Microsoft, maybe even Google as well. So basically, you see people who accuse us of spreading disinformation, quite literally attending conferences with the premier Chinese Communist Party body that is spreading disinformation. And it really makes you wonder, maybe they're taking cues from the Chinese Communist Party on how to silence the truth, because it seems like they are quite literally marching in lockstep with the Chinese Communist Party when it comes to what stories they're deciding to censor and what stories they're deciding to allow and promote.
Look, I don't expect Xi Jinping to be friendly to the United States. I don't expect the Chinese Communist Party to be friendly to the United States. Those are, the United States, the Western world stands, or is supposed to stand, in complete opposition to communist values and the China and authoritarianism in the vein of the Chinese Communist Party. What I do expect is somebody who made their billions in the United States of America as a result of US freedoms, as a result of US technology, US initiatives, US staff, all of it. I expect them to adhere to very basic tenets of treating people in this country, your customers, Mr. Zuckerberg, as non-stupid people, and not to... Let me be very clear about something. So the title of this story is Facebook's CCP-linked fact checker is now censoring stories critical of Zuckerberg-funded Wuhan lab partners. It seems so convoluted, but it's this ecosystem that Zuckerberg has built around him. And I am going to name this episode this: All Roads Lead to Zuckerberg. Because if and when anybody on the political right wants to get serious about things, the first person you absolutely have to fully investigate, and I believe should end up being charged down the line, is Mark Zuckerberg. This person is complicit in selling the United States out to the Chinese Communist Party. He's complicit with defrauding the American public out of real information as it exists on his platform, using a fake fact checker, who, by the way, we haven't even gotten to the background of Lead Stories, right? Who are Lead Stories staff?
Yeah, in brief, any donation that has come per the FEC database from a Lead Stories employee has gone to a Democratic candidate. This is all the way from their kind of rank and file journalist types to the founders of the company.
They're not even an American Perry Sanders.
Yeah, so So we put up a story because they censored our story about how Act Blue was funneling money to Black Lives Matter. So we put up a story to say, hey, Facebook's so-called independent fact checker is not independent. They're hardcore Democrats. They donate to these very intense anti-Trump super PACs. They have like 130 years of collective experience working over at CNN. So it's basically people who couldn't make it at CNN. If they don't want to go and work at CGTN, which we've exposed the revolving door between those two outlets, they go and work at Lead Stories. So we put that story up. Then Alan Duke and Lead Stories fact checks our article where we expose their bias, and they basically put an article and they're like, we're not biased. And
their article was one of our founders, or the chairman, Perry Sanders, once gave to a non-Democrat candidate. It wasn't that he gave to a Republican, by the way. It was a race.
They said he was Republican.
They said he was a
Republican.
We found out it wasn't. Obviously, he
was a never Trumper, and it was a nonpartisan race.
It was a nonpartisan race. It was a non-party affiliation race, which I don't think I'd even heard of until that point in time. It was some local mayoral race where he basically signed a check to one of his buddies, and they used that as a means to fact check us by saying they're all Democrats. No, let me be very clear. Every single party donation that has ever come out of Lead Stories is to the Democratic Party of America, from the $5 that some of his staff have given to the $500 that some of the bigwigs have given, and more. And it's not even a US-based company. Let's be very clear about this. They rely on this other company called Trendalizer, which is based in, now you're really getting into the weeds, ladies and gentlemen, which is based, I think, in Belgium.
Martin Shank.
Not even a real country. Right? So you've got a Belgian, sourced company, Lead Stories, which is working for an ostensibly American company to fact check an American reporter, that's you, right? Over an issue based between the Chinese Communist Party and Dr. Ralph Baric.
I think that's called foreign collusion.
I think it is called foreign collusion. I think it really is called foreign collusion. I would go so far as to call it treason, Natalie. I think that there is a lot more to do. Listen, there would be nothing that would please me more than dialing Alan Duke's phone number that I have in front of me right now and dialing him into the show. But unfortunately, California, where he is, has two-party consent laws. And so I am not allowed to do that, which is something we need to really get gone, because we really need to start, getting to these people and putting them on air. Anything more, Natalie, on this?
Just remember, Mark Zuckerberg probably hates Americans like myself, conservatives like probably you, the listener, but listen to what he had to say about meeting Xi Jinping. It was, quote, an honor, and it was a meaningful personal milestone. I don't think he would say the same about meeting
me.
meeting us, meeting anyone who supports President Trump and the MAGA agenda. So just remember that when you're being lectured by Mark Zuckerberg and his funded cronies about how deplorable you are.
Well, you know what? I have to be honest. It would not be a personal milestone for me to meet him either. So, just very quickly before we go and I start reeling off the names of the latest supporters on the site, because, ladies and gentlemen, we do need your help to continue doing this reporting. But can I ask you about this Hunter Biden story, Natalie? This Chinese nuclear plant leak is not getting as much attention as it should be getting in the national news. No surprises there. Nobody apart from you. I think Zero Hedge has picked it up on the back of our reporting. Yeah. But nobody apart from you has picked up on this pretty integral part of why Joe Biden is not treating this story seriously.
Yeah, it's no surprise that Joe Biden thinks the situation is not at a, quote, crisis level. And of course, the situation that I'm referring to was a French co-operator of a Chinese power plant reportedly reached out to the White House to say that they were experiencing a leak because the Chinese safety authority that controls acceptable limits for radiation detection at this plant was artificially kind of inflating the level to which they could, I guess, enrich uranium. I think I'm correct in my analysis. But
sure.
All that aside.
Well, if you're not, Alan Duke will be on you. Oh wait, that's only when you are correct.
Yeah, I won't say scheming. No, all that aside, the bigger story here is that this plant is run by China General Nuclear Power Corporation, which, if you've ever been on the Hunter Biden-led BHR Partners investment fund website, you will see that that is a company that has enjoyed millions of dollars in investment from BHR Partners, which is, of course, the 2013 joint venture between Hunter Biden, John Kerry's stepson, and a couple other well-connected DC princelings, and the Chinese government, which was created about 2 weeks after Joe Biden had visited China. But this firm, BHR Partners, actually invested in the initial public offering. They were a cornerstone investor worth $10 million of CGN. Years later, people who worked at this company, CGN, were indicted by, of course, the Trump Department of Justice for stealing national security risking nuclear secrets from the U.S., trying to get American researchers to go and boost the Chinese Communist Party's nuclear sector. But nonetheless, Hunter Biden, who again, by all reports, still maintains a 10% stake in this company, quite literally funded to the tune of millions of dollars the Chinese Communist Party state-owned nuclear firm that controls a nuclear power plant that is leaking and posing a, quote, imminent radiological threat, according to one of the kind of French subsidiaries who also helps out in terms of control of the plant. And meanwhile, you've kind of heard nothing from the Biden regime on it. And I don't think that there's much surprise why, considering that Hunter Biden is heavily invested. I mean, this is one of those stories that it's just you can't fathom it. Although, I mean, I guess I can, but it is so, I think, what better example? Obviously, we've said how Hunter Biden and the Biden family have profited immensely from the decline of America, right? It's elite capture, it's selling out America. But I think that this takes that metaphor to a new level when you quite literally see a Chinese state-run energy firm, which I don't know why American cash is being sent to anyways, is controlling a nuclear power plant that is posing a, quote, imminent radiological threat to not just the United States, but the entire world. So I guess I hope it was worth whatever money you made from that investment, Hunter Biden, because if this turns out to be a massive leak, I don't think CGN stock will do too well.
Well, I'm going to wrap it up real quick by just mentioning this story that I have up on the site at the moment as well. A piece of analysis really from me about the vaccine passports, which have just been introduced and are finalising their introduction in the European Union at the moment. They expect to have all countries in the European Union adhering to this vaccine passport. It's a digital passport, contains a QR code. There's also a paper version. They expect this to be done by the 1st of July. That is just a couple of weeks away from when we're recording this podcast. It's called the EU Digital COVID Certificate. And I just wanted to, the reason I felt so passionate about this is, number one, I started looking for news about this and I just couldn't really find it anywhere, which I thought was a pretty big deal. I mean, this is a pretty big block of people, 500 million or so people, that are now being told, hey, in order to travel within the countries that you signed up to the European Union, and a lot of these countries in the European Union signed up for freedom of movement, right? Schengen area, freedom of movement. Of course, the Brits didn't want it. That's why we left in 2016. But a lot of these people do want it. And now they're being told, hey, in order to avail yourself of that quote-unquote freedom that they have championed for so long, you're going to have one of these vaccine passports. I think it's a human rights abuse, quite frankly. But I want to give a special shout out to an old moron in the United Kingdom who writes for the Times newspaper. His name is Hugo Rifkind. He's actually the son of a very corrupt politician called Malcolm Rifkind, and I believe the cousin of Leon Britton, a former politician accused of being a pedophile. Nevertheless, Hugo Rifkind had written, quote, vaccine passports are only for fantasy land, and written this entire article about how this was a conspiracy theory. That was in November of last year. I tweeted this morning, and he got very upset that I tweeted about his article. He said, no, I was only talking about domestic travel inside the country. Right, yeah, you were definitely talking about vaccine passports. To pass through a port. You were definitely talking about vaccine passports inside your own country. You utter moron. Hugo Rifkind. Just a special shout out for you there. Alan Duke, by the way, I am always amused by the fact that Lead Stories, if you scroll down to the bottom of their webpage and go to their About section, you can actually contact them for yourselves. Alan Duke's email address, his phone number, their mailing address is all on their website. I'm not gonna read it out. I'm not gonna dox him, but it's available. It's freely available. They make it available. Perry Sanders Law Firm is their registered agent out in Colorado. Alan Duke is mailing addresses over at Studio City in California.
Say hello to Alan Duke for me.
Say hello to Alan Duke for us. And of course, Martin, what's his name? Martin
Shank.
Martin Shank.
I believe that's how you pronounce it.
Over there in Brussels. His phone number is on the website as well. So, it's time to take the fight, metaphorically speaking, of course, to these morons, these losers, these liars, these falsehoods, these frauds. And I hope you will. I hope that you will join us. I mean, we are, I think, just at the beginning of so much of this, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank all of you who help this reporting happen. Also, Natalie, thank you for being here today and walking us through all of that information.
Thank you for having me.
Right, you're off on your travels again.
Yes.
No, that's it. You don't get to talk more. I want to say thank you to Carol, Rusty, Aubrey, Angel, Richard, Glenda, Nancy, Wade, Andy, Michael, Santina, Eric, Lindsay, South, Monica, Ang, Jackie, Christine, Jerry, Patty, and so many more people who have signed up to support the National Pulse. Stuart, Richard, Michael, Misty, Andy, Philip, Lesser, Mark, Pat, Rita, Cheryl, Julie, Susie, Chad, Amy, Sue, Joseph, John, Ronald, Pam, and so many more. You can head on over. It's real simple to fundrealnews.com. Fundrealnews.com. Now look, I don't expect you to be handing us $500,000 grants like Mark Zuckerberg does for Ralph Barrick, or the hundreds of thousands of dollars he pays Alan Duke to maintain that gorgeous ponytail, which I'm sure he has mounted in a frame somewhere in his home, the weirdo. But from $5, $10, $20, $500, we're really grateful for our super backers who give us $2,500. If you can help us in any way, please head on over to fundrealnews.com. We'll be back with another podcast in a couple of days. Stick around and stay tuned for that. All the stories are up on the site, thenationalpulse.com. Make sure you're following Natalie at Natalie G. Winters. I'm at Raheem Kassam. And we'll see you again soon.